You are not who you think you are. I need you to sit with that for a second, not as a motivational line, not as a feel-good affirmation, as a fact, a neuroscientific, psychologically documented, peer-reviewed fact. The person you believe yourself to be the one who says, "I'm just not good with money," or "I've never been lucky," or "people like me don't get those kinds of opportunities." That person was built, constructed, piece by piece, not by you, not by your choices, but by experiences you didn't even fully understand when they happened, by words spoken to you when you were too young to defend yourself against them, by patterns you watched and absorbed before your brain even knew how to question what it was absorbing. You have been living inside a story you did not write. And here is the part that should make you furious and hopeful at the same time. That story can be rewritten. Completely. Permanently. Not through toxic positivity. Not through pretending the past didn't happen, but through understanding exactly how your brain works and using that knowledge against the very beliefs that have been working against you. This is not a pep talk. This is a dismantling. A careful, honest, sometimes uncomfortable dismantling of the invisible cage most people live and die inside of, never once realizing the door was never actually locked. Stay with me, because by the time we're done, you won't just feel differently, you'll think differently, and that difference will follow you for the rest of your life. Part 1. The Architecture of a Cage. Let's start with a simple question. When did you decide you were limited? You probably don't remember the exact moment. That's not an accident, it's actually part of the mechanism. Limiting beliefs don't usually announce themselves. They don't arrive with a warning label. They slip in during moments of vulnerability, moments of confusion, moments when you were simply too young or too overwhelmed to filter what you were receiving. A child who watches their parents argue about money every night doesn't think, "I am forming a limiting belief about financial abundance right now." They just feel the fear. They just absorb the tension. And their brain, brilliant and adaptive as it is, starts building a map, a survival map. And on that map, money is marked as dangerous, scarce, a source of conflict. That map becomes the lens through which every financial decision that child makes as a teenager, as an adult, as a parent themselves gets filtered. This is how it works. This is how it has always worked. The human brain is not primarily designed for happiness. I know that's uncomfortable, but it's true, and understanding it changes everything. The brain is designed for survival. Its entire architecture is oriented around one goal: keep you alive. And in the ancient world that this brain evolved in, the most dangerous thing you could do was stray too far from the familiar, the tribe, the known path, the established patterns. Novelty was risk, comfort was safety. And so your brain built systems, incredibly powerful, incredibly efficient systems, to make sure you stayed close to what was familiar. When you experience something that feels threatening, your amygdala, the brain's alarm system, fires. It tags that experience with an emotional signal. Danger. Avoid. Remember this. And because the brain learns through repetition and emotional intensity, the more often a message is repeated, or the more emotionally charged the moment, the deeper and more permanent the neural pathway becomes. A teacher who tells a child, "You're not a math person," once might not leave a lasting mark. But a parent who communicates even non-verbally, even through sighs and disappointment and comparison, that you are somehow less than your sibling, less than the neighbor's kid, less than what they hoped for, that wires deep. That wires fast. That becomes a foundational belief, not just about performance but about worth. And here is where it gets even more insidious. Once a belief is formed, the brain does something that psychologists call confirmation bias. It filters your reality to find evidence that confirms what you already believe. If you believe you're unlucky, your brain becomes extraordinarily skilled at noticing every time something goes wrong and virtually blind to every time something goes right. It's not lying to you on purpose. It's just doing its job. The job of maintaining a consistent internal map of reality. The job of not having to rebuild the entire world from scratch every single morning. Your brain hates uncertainty more than it hates suffering. Think about that. People stay in painful jobs, painful relationships, painful patterns of self-destruction not because they want to suffer, but because the suffering is known, familiar, mapped. The alternative change is uncertain, and to the ancient survival brain, uncertain means dangerous. This is not weakness. This is not stupidity. This is millions of years of biological programming doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem is that you are not living in the ancient world anymore. The saber-toothed tigers are gone, but the alarm systems remain, and they are now firing at job interviews, at moments of potential love, at opportunities for growth, protecting you from the only things that could actually save you. So the first thing we need to understand, really understand, in our bones is this. Your limiting beliefs are not the truth about you. They are survival strategies that have outlived their usefulness. They were once protective, they are now prisons. And the difference between people who break through them and people who don't is not talent. It is not luck. It is not circumstance. It is one thing and one thing only, the willingness to look directly at the cage. Part 2. The Identity Trap. There is something even more powerful than a limiting belief. Something that makes limiting beliefs nearly impossible to shift with willpower alone. And it is this. When a limiting belief gets attached to your identity, it stops being something you think and becomes something you are. I struggle with confidence is a thought, a temporary state, something that can shift. I am not a confident person is an identity, and your brain will protect your identity the way it protects your life, because to the subconscious mind, they are the same thing. This is why affirmations alone so rarely work. Standing in front of a mirror saying, I am confident, I am successful, I am worthy, when your deep neural wiring says otherwise doesn't rewire anything, it just creates cognitive dissonance, an internal war. And the older, deeper belief almost always wins because it has more neural connections, more emotional reinforcement, more history behind it. The psychologist William James, more than a century ago, wrote that the greatest revolution in his generation was the discovery that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitude of mind. He was right. But what he couldn't have fully known then, what neuroscience has confirmed in vivid detail in the decades since, is that changing your attitude of mind requires changing your brain. Literally, physically, at the level of neural architecture. And to change your brain, you cannot fight your identity. You have to subvert it. Let me give you an example that might feel uncomfortably familiar. Imagine someone who grew up poor. Not just financially poor, but poor in the sense of scarcity, where there was never enough, where asking for things felt shameful, where watching money disappear month after month wired an entire emotional system around lack. Now imagine that person as an adult genuinely wants financial success. They read the books, they learn the strategies, they might even take the right steps, but at some point every single time something sabotages the progress. A sudden expense. A bad investment decision. A subconscious push away from an opportunity that would have genuinely changed their trajectory. People on the outside look at this pattern and call it bad luck. The person experiencing it might call it fate. But what it actually is, what the research clearly shows, is identity defense. The subconscious mind is simply maintaining consistency with the belief that says, people like me don't have money. Not because it wants you to suffer, but because it is doing what it was always programmed to do. Keep you consistent with who you believe you are. This is the trap. This is why people can want change desperately with their full conscious will and still not change. Because wanting something with your conscious mind and having your subconscious programmed for the opposite is not a recipe for growth. It is a recipe for exhaustion, frustration, and eventually, the conclusion that you are simply broken. That some people have what it takes and others don't. That this must just be who you are. But that conclusion is itself a limiting belief. And it is one of the most dangerous ones because it is self-sealing. It explains every failure in a way that requires no further examination. It is the final door of the cage closing. The way out is not more willpower. The way out is understanding. Here is what you need to know. Identity is not fixed. It is a narrative, a story your brain tells itself about who you are based on the evidence it has collected over your lifetime. And like any narrative, it can be revised. Not by pretending the past didn't happen, not by forcing yourself to feel things you don't feel, but by systematically introducing new evidence that begins to shift what your brain believes is true about you. It starts with a question, a deceptively simple question that most people never ask. Who told you that you were this? Not as an accusation, not to blame anyone, but as a genuine investigation. Trace the belief, follow it back. Where did it come from? What experience planted it? What voice reinforced it? What moment made it feel real? Because when you can see the origin of a belief, when you can see it as a thing that happened to you rather than a truth about you, you create the first hairline fracture in the wall. And from a hairline fracture, everything eventually crumbles. Part 3. The Neuroscience of Rewiring. For most of human history, we believed the brain was essentially fixed after childhood. That you got the brain you got, with the wiring you got, and that was that. That the adult mind was a finished product capable of learning new information, yes, but fundamentally, structurally the same. We were wrong. In the 1990s, a quiet revolution began in neuroscience. Researchers started finding evidence for something that overturned decades of assumption, neuroplasticity. The discovery, now thoroughly documented, now foundational to our understanding of the brain, that the brain is not fixed, that it is plastic, malleable, that it changes structure, grows new connections, rewires existing pathways based on experience throughout your entire life, not just in childhood, not just in young adulthood. At any age, in response to any experience that is practiced with sufficient consistency and emotional engagement. Neurons that fire together wire together. This phrase, a simplification of the work of neuroscientist Donald Hebb, captures the core mechanism. When you think a thought repeatedly, the neurons associated with that thought fire together repeatedly. And every time they fire together, the connection between them gets stronger, faster, more automatic. This is how habits form. This is how skills are built. This is how beliefs become deep, unexamined assumptions about reality. And this is also how beliefs can be changed. Because if the brain builds pathways through repetition and emotional intensity, then new pathways can be built the same way. Old pathways don't disappear entirely, but they weaken with disuse. Like a muscle that isn't trained, like a path through a field that is no longer walked. The grass grows back, the path fades, and the new path, the one you deliberately and consistently choose, becomes the road. There is a study that researchers did with people learning to play the piano. One group practiced physical scales on a keyboard every day for 5 days. Another group simply imagined doing the same practice. They sat quietly, visualized their fingers moving, heard the notes in their mind, felt the movement in their imagination without ever touching a physical keyboard. When brain scans were compared, both groups showed nearly identical changes in the motor cortex of their brain. The physical group and the imagination group, nearly identical. Your brain does not fully distinguish between something vividly imagined and something actually experienced. And what this means for belief change is profound. It means that you do not have to wait for your circumstances to change before your brain begins to change. You can begin rewiring right now, with deliberate thought, with directed visualization, with intentional emotional engagement. This is not mysticism. This is mechanics, neural mechanics, and understanding it transforms the entire conversation about change from one of hope, maybe I can be different someday, to one of method. I know how this works. I know what I need to do. I can begin today. But there is something else the research shows that is equally important, and it is this. Emotional intensity accelerates learning. The more emotionally engaged you are with an experience, the more it matters to you. The more it feels real and significant, the faster and deeper the neural pathways form. This is why trauma rewires so deeply and so fast. The extreme emotional intensity of a traumatic experience burns pathways into the neural architecture at a speed that ordinary learning doesn't come close to. And it is also why positive experiences that are genuinely felt, not just intellectually acknowledged, but emotionally inhabited, can begin shifting wiring faster than you might expect. This is the mechanism behind practices like visualization, journaling, meditation, and therapeutic approaches like EMDR and cognitive reprocessing therapy. They work not through magic, but through directed neuroplasticity. They give the brain new experiences, new emotional data that begin to compete with the old wiring. The question is not whether your brain can change. It already has, thousands of times, without your conscious direction. The question is whether you are going to begin directing that change deliberately. And the answer to that question begins with a choice. Part 4. The 5 Steps to Shattering a Limiting Belief. We have been building to this, and now I want to give you something concrete, not vague inspiration, a process, one that is grounded in psychology, supported by neuroscience, and practical enough to begin today. 5 steps. They build on each other. Do not skip any of them. Step 1. Excavation. Find the belief. Most people try to change a behavior without ever identifying the belief underneath it. They try to exercise more without addressing the belief that says, "I don't deserve to feel good in my body." They try to earn more without addressing the belief that says, "Wanting money makes you greedy." They try to build better relationships without addressing the belief that says, "People always eventually leave." You cannot fight an enemy you cannot see. So the first step is excavation. Dig. Look at the areas of your life where progress consistently stalls, where you keep hitting the same wall, where you keep self-sabotaging in patterns you can't fully explain. And instead of blaming the circumstance or blaming other people or just trying harder next time, ask the question underneath the question. What would I have to believe about myself or the world for this pattern to make complete sense? Because your subconscious always makes sense on its own terms. The behavior that looks irrational from the outside is perfectly logical from inside the belief system that generated it. If you believe that success makes you a target, then of course you subconsciously sabotage success. It's protection. If you believe that love always ends in abandonment, then of course you push people away before they can leave. It's armor. The behavior is not the problem. The belief underneath it is. Take time with this. Write it down. Get specific. Not "I have low self-esteem," that's a category, not a belief. Dig into specifics. I believe I am fundamentally less capable than other people. I believe that no matter how hard I work, it won't be enough. I believe that good things that come to me will eventually be taken away. Those are beliefs. Name them. Look at them. They lose some of their power the moment you can see them clearly. Step 2. Interrogation. Question the belief. A belief feels like truth, but it is not truth. It is a conclusion drawn from limited evidence, collected under emotional circumstances, by a version of you that did not have the full picture. Now you interrogate it. Ask, is this belief absolutely, verifiably true? Not does it feel true? Not can I find examples that support it? Is it objectively, universally, without exception true? The answer is almost always no. Then ask, where did this belief come from? Who modeled it to me? What experience created it? What was I trying to protect myself from when I formed it? Then ask, what has this belief cost me? Not just financially, emotionally, relationally, in terms of choices not made and risks not taken and versions of yourself that were quietly surrendered. What has this belief actually cost you? This step is not comfortable. It requires honesty that our ego often resists. But the discomfort is not evidence that you're doing something wrong. It is evidence that you're finally getting close enough to the actual wound to begin healing it. Lean into the discomfort. It is the sensation of change. Then ask the final question, who would I be without this belief? Not who you should be, not who other people want you to be, But genuinely, who would you be? How would you move? What would you attempt? How would you see yourself if this belief simply did not exist? Sit in that for a while. Let yourself feel it. That feeling is important. It is planting the first seeds of a new neural pathway. Step 3. Interruption. Break the pattern. Your limiting beliefs are maintained by patterns. Habitual thought patterns, emotional patterns, behavioral patterns. Every time you think the thought, feel the associated emotion, and act in alignment with the belief, you strengthen the neural pathway. You add another layer of concrete to the wall. So the third step is interruption. You need to break the pattern in real time. This requires awareness first. You need to start noticing when the belief is activating, not just in the big moments but in the small, daily ones. The moment you hesitate before speaking in a meeting, the moment you immediately disqualify yourself from an opportunity, the moment you scroll past something that could help you because something in your gut said that's not for people like me. Notice it, call it out internally, not with judgment, with curiosity. There it is again, that belief. Showing up right on schedule. When you notice it, interrupt it. Physically, if you can stand up, change your posture, take a breath, do something to break the physiological state the thought is trying to pull you into. The research on embodied cognition is clear. Your physical state and your mental state are not separate. They influence each other constantly. A slouched posture reinforces feelings of smallness. An open, upright posture actively works against them. Then replace the thought, not with a grandiose affirmation that your brain immediately rejects, but with a genuine question. Is that actually true right now? What evidence do I have that contradicts that? What would a version of me without this belief do right now? Questions are more effective than affirmations for one critical reason. Your brain is built to search for answers to questions. When you ask your brain a genuine question, it cannot help but start looking for an answer. Ask, why am I such a failure? And your brain will find evidence of failure. Ask, what is one thing I have actually done well recently? And your brain will find that instead. The question steers the search. Use questions. Interrupt the pattern. Do this hundreds of times if you have to, because eventually the interruption becomes the automatic response. The new pathway becomes the easier road, and the old belief finds itself with less and less fuel. Step 4. Installation. Build the new belief. You cannot simply remove a limiting belief and leave a vacuum. The human mind doesn't work that way. Nature abhors emptiness, and so does neural architecture. If you remove an old belief without installing a replacement, the old one will return, or something equally unhelpful will fill the space. So you need to deliberately, consciously, emotionally install a new belief. Not an aspirational belief you can't connect to. Not something so far from your current experience that your brain's alarm systems immediately reject it. Something adjacent to the truth. Something you can find even a small amount of genuine evidence for. If your limiting belief is "I always fail," you cannot simply replace it with "I always succeed." Your brain has too much evidence against that. But you might be able to genuinely believe, "I have failed at specific things and I have also succeeded at others, and failure is information, not identity." That is not toxic positivity. That is accurate. And because it is accurate, your brain can accept it without triggering the rejection response. Work with this new belief daily, not as a chore, as a practice. Write it down in the morning. Visualize what it looks like to live from this belief. Find moments throughout your day where you can act in alignment with it, even in tiny ways, because action is the most powerful belief reinforcement that exists. Here is something that most people get backwards. They think they need to believe something before they can act on it. In reality, acting on a new belief, even when you don't yet fully believe it, is one of the fastest ways to generate the evidence your brain needs to actually start believing it. Act first. The belief follows. Psychologists call this behavioral activation. You behave your way into a new belief, not by faking it, but by testing it. By taking small, deliberate actions that say to your nervous system, "This new thing is safe. This new identity is survivable." And every time you survive it, every time you act from the new belief, and the ceiling doesn't fall and you add another stone to the foundation of a new neural architecture. Step 5. Protection. Guard the new wiring. This step is the one most people forget, and it is why so many people make genuine progress and then backslide. You have to protect what you are building. Because the world you live in, and particularly the people closest to you, are often unconsciously invested in the old version of you, not because they want to hurt you, but because who you were was predictable. It fit into the system they had built around you. When you start changing, when you start setting different boundaries, making different choices, believing different things about yourself, it creates disruption. And the people around you will often, without realizing it, push back, subtly or not so subtly. You've changed, sometimes said as an accusation, sometimes said with genuine confusion, sometimes said by someone who is afraid of what your change means for them. You need to be prepared for this, not with resentment, not with defensiveness, but with a calm, protected sense of self that can absorb the friction without being derailed by it. Be very careful about what you consume, what you watch, what you listen to, what you read, what conversations you spend time in. Because the brain is a sponge, and every input is creating or reinforcing neural pathways. If you spend an hour doing deep mindset work and then an hour consuming content that reinforces scarcity, victimhood, and powerlessness, you are working against yourself. Be intentional. Be selective. Not to the point of avoidance or denial, but to the point of recognizing that your environment is always either feeding your growth or feeding your cage. And be patient with yourself. Genuinely patient. Neural rewiring is not a weekend project. The beliefs you are working against were laid down across years of reinforcement. The new pathways need time to strengthen. There will be days when the old beliefs roar back louder than ever. That is not failure. That is the brain's last attempt to maintain the familiar before the new becomes the dominant pathway. Every relapse into the old thinking is simply information, not a verdict on who you are, just data. What triggered it? What was the emotional state? What circumstance? Learn from it, adjust, and keep walking the new path. Part 5. The life on the other side. I want to tell you something about the people who have done this work, who have gone through the discomfort of excavating beliefs they didn't want to look at, who asked the hard questions, who interrupted the old patterns hundreds of times, who installed new neural pathways through deliberate practice and small, consistent action, who protected their growth against the friction of a world that wasn't ready for their change. They don't look like superhumans. They don't become people who never struggle or never doubt. The difference is not the absence of difficulty. The difference is what they believe about difficulty when it arrives. The person wired for limitation experiences a setback and hears a voice that says, "See, this is what always happens. This is who you are. This is proof." And they stop. The person who has done the rewiring experiences the same setback and hears a different voice. That's information. What can I learn? What can I adjust? What's the next step? And they keep moving. That is the entire difference. Not talent, not luck, not privilege. The story the brain tells about what hard things mean. Because here is the truth about potential. Real potential, not the watered-down, motivational poster version. But genuine human potential is not a fixed quantity that some people are born with and others aren't. It is not a gift distributed unevenly at birth. It is the distance between who you currently believe yourself to be and who you are actually capable of becoming. And that distance, for most people, is almost incomprehensibly vast. Most people will never cross it, not because they can't, because they will never seriously interrogate the beliefs that tell them they can't, because the discomfort of looking inward will feel like too much compared to the familiar comfort of staying exactly where they are. But some people will. Some people, maybe you, sitting with this right now, will reach a point where the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of change. And when that happens, when that threshold is crossed, everything becomes possible in a way it never was before. Not easy, possible. There is a version of your life where the beliefs that have quietly governed your choices since childhood no longer have any power over you, where you apply for the thing, where you have the conversation, where you take the step, not because you're not afraid, but because the belief that says you're not capable of this no longer sounds like your voice. It sounds like what it actually is, an echo of someone else's fear, absorbed at a time when you didn't know any better, held in neural pathways that were never yours to keep forever. That version of your life is not a fantasy. It is what happens when you take the brain's capacity for change seriously and use it deliberately instead of letting it be shaped by default. The closing. So here is where we are. You came into this with a set of beliefs about who you are and what's possible for you. Some of those beliefs serve you. Some of them, maybe the most foundational ones, have been quietly costing you more than you've ever allowed yourself to calculate. You now know that those beliefs were built, not inherited, that they are neural pathways, not permanent truths, that your brain, the same brain that built those pathways, is capable of building new ones at any point in your life, that the process is not magical but mechanical, that it requires excavation, interrogation, interruption, installation, and protection, that it requires honesty that is uncomfortable and patience that is underrated. And you know something else now, something that I hope lands somewhere deep and stays there. The version of you that exists beyond the limiting beliefs, the one who moves through the world with a fundamentally different sense of what is possible, that version is not who you need to become. It is who you already are underneath the conditioning. The beliefs are not you, they were placed on you, and they can be removed. The work is not about building something from nothing. It is about uncovering something that was always there. The real you, the one who existed before the world started telling you who to be. Start the excavation, ask the questions, break the patterns, build something new, protect it. Because the life you have been living inside the cage, it is not the only life available to you. It never was.